Hold on, let me get a time. Let me get a clock in front of me very quickly. Okay, 2:37. Great. Good afternoon, fellow COC members, and to all the members of the public who have joined us. Today is March 26, 2026. Welcome to the United to House LA Citizens Oversight Committee. It is now 2:37. Before roll call, please afford me a few housekeeping comments. First, speaker cards for those wishing to make public comment. If you haven't already done so, please take a public speaker card, fill it out, and hand it to one of the LAHD staff. If you are joining the meeting virtually and would like to make a public comment, please refer to the instructions on the agenda on how to place yourself in the virtual queue. Speaking time. As always, we welcome and encourage public comment as your voice is vital in how we shape our policies and direction. Thank you all for your commitment. I will silence that. And we want everybody to be heard. However, to ensure that the committee has ample time to vet and deliberate the issues on today's agenda, we request the following. Well, there's not too many of you, so I don't think I need to request the following. However, we are going to limit speaker time to 2 minutes, please. And regarding translation, we will be utilizing simultaneous interpretation to prevent interruptions to our speakers. If anyone in the audience needs or requires Spanish language interpretation for this meeting, please notify LHD staff to obtain a headset. Those who are in person that do not speak Spanish will also need a headset for English interpretation. I need a headset, by the way. For those on Zoom that require interpretation, please select the appropriate language interpretation using the globe-shaped interpretation button only when you require it. Otherwise, please tune into the main audio channel. For example, if you are in the Spanish language interpretation channel and there is a public comment in Spanish, you will need to switch to the main audio to hear it in Spanish and vice versa. On to the roll call. I will ask City Attorney Michael Custodio to please take roll.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Chairperson Jones, currently absent. Vice Chair Espinosa Coulter.
Here.
Committee Member Abarca. Here. Committee Member Ascora. Committee Member Barragan. Absent. Committee Member Saya. Absent. Committee Member Holland. Absent. Committee Member Knight. Absent. Committee Member Lewis. Committee Member Morales. Absent. Committee Member Nishimoto. Here. Committee Member Reed.
Here.
Committee Member Romero.
Here.
Committee Member Rout. Absent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, you have quorum.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question of staff. I'd love for Sarita to be here for public comment. Can we take the auditor's report first? Okay, I'd love that. Everybody's approval? Okay. In that case, we are skipping to agenda item number. Which agenda item is this? 7. Thank you so much. This is the fiscal year 2023, 2024 and 2024/2025 Audit Findings Report. This report is being presented by our selected contractor, MGO. Please find the relevant supplemental materials attached to the agenda. Per section 22/618/6C4 of Measure ULA, the COC is required to oversee an annual external audit of House LA Fund receipts and expenditures. In addition to the receipts and expenditures audit, which our selected contractor will present today, the COC is currently beginning its process towards a more holistic programmatic evaluation of Measure ULA through work with the Program Evaluation Ad Hoc. I will now turn it over to Linda Hurley and Marilyn Toledo
It's just me today.
Oh, okay. From MGO to present.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I am Linda Hurley. I am with MGO. I was the engagement partner for the 2 audits that we completed and are, it's green. Is that better? Very close. All right. All right, here we go. All right, so if it didn't come on record, I'm Linda Hurley. I was the engagement partner for the 2 audit reports that are included in your packet. And so just by background, the first audit was the very first audit for the ULA program. And so it's a very shortened period. And so what we wanted to do was get you guys caught up to a more normal fiscal year end to align with the city, since the city is responsible for the accounting records for the program. So this first period, very, very short. It's from the inception in April going through June 30th, 2023. And then we did a 2-year audit report for June 30th, 2024 and 2025. So that's what I'll be presenting on today. Do I have a presentation that needs to come up? It was on. Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you. All right, so I have a brief presentation today. And what we're going to cover the audit results. We also have some required communications that we make at the end of every financial statement audit to the governing board, those charged with governance, which in this case is the Oversight Committee. And then we also will have just a brief highlight of upcoming accounting standards that need to be considered going forward. Okay, I want to start with the deliverables. And as I just mentioned, we do have 2 audit reports. The first one covering April 23 through June 30th, 23. And then we have the full fiscal years of 24 and 25. And so those are the financial statements. They include our audit opinion, the financial statements, and note disclosures that give a reader more information regarding the financial activities of ULA. Also in the packet, we have our report on internal controls over financial reporting and compliance and other matters. And so we perform this audit in accordance with government auditing standards. So we do have this additional report for you that discusses our consideration of internal controls and compliance over the financial report. And that report is actually also within the financial statement report. It's at the very end. And I'm going to go over the results of that report because we did have a few internal control findings that we identified during our audit process. And then finally, the last communication we have is our required communications. And these are communications that we make at the end of every financial statement audit, which really covers the result of the audit process. So I'm going to briefly go over that as well. The framework of the audit was for the financial statements, we are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So those are the standard principles that all financial reports are reported on. And so we've evaluated the reports and the financial activities against those accounting principles. Us as auditors, we perform our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, and we also perform it in accordance with government auditing standards. And that's what triggers that second report at the end of the financial statement reports discussing internal controls and compliance. So I'm pleased to report today on the audit results that we provided an unmodified opinion on both sets of financial statements, or actually all three audit periods. And what that means is that's the highest level of assurance that an independent auditor can provide to you that the financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. So that's a clean opinion on those financial statements. However, we did identify several findings related to revenue recognition and expense recognition. So this is the timing on when transactions are captured within the financial reporting period. So I'm going to show you the impacts of those findings. But the items that we identified during the audit process, they were corrected in the financial statements, and that's why we can give you that clean opinion. Okay. So this next slide is the required communications and the summary of our audit results. I've already gone over our responsibilities, which were in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. The planned scope and timing of our initial engagement, it did change a little bit. The scope, it did not change, but the timing of the engagement changed. And there was some significant challenges in terms of completing the engagement, which causes some delays. And they were primarily around staffing constraints of us working with the housing department. The accounting policies and practices related to this engagement, they are described in the notes to each set of financial statements. And primarily the accounting principles align with the city's accounting policies because the city is responsible for accounting for this activity here. So this activity is a fund of the cities. It's a program of the cities. It's not a separate legal entity, but it is a separate reporting entity under your ordinance. We didn't identify any unusual transactions as part of this engagement, but there were a number of estimates, primarily related to the fair value of investments. This organization has the investments invested in the city's pool, so we have to consider fair value. Now, we are the auditors for the city, so we were able to leverage off of the work that we do on the city's financial statement audits, and we were able to tie in the cash and investment balances and the fair value measurements to the city's overall cash portfolio. So we are very comfortable with those particular policies around fair value. The other significant judgment or estimate has to do with the allowance for doubtful accounts on loans. Now, in fiscal year 25, the program started making loans, and so there is an allowance based on LAHD's policies depending on the characteristic of the loans that have been issued. So there is an allowance reported, and LAHD has a very robust allowance policy, and so that was applied to these financial statements. The next column is the audit adjustments and uncorrected misstatements. As I previously mentioned, we did identify a number of audit adjustments related to revenue and expense recognition. But we did not, everything got corrected in the financial statements. So there was no uncorrected misstatements. There may be smaller misstatements that we identify as part of the audit process. And if they meet a certain threshold where they're not considered trivial, but they wouldn't affect our opinion, so they were still considered immaterial, we would have reported those to you. But all of the misstatements that we identified were corrected within the financial statements. There is required supplementary information that's included in the financial statements. And for this committee, that would be an important place to start for the fiscal year 2024 and 25 financial statements. This is the management's discussion and analysis. So it's a comparative analysis of what occurred in the current period and what occurred in the last period. And there's narrative that goes along with that. And it's helpful for a financial statement user to read through that to better understand the financial statements. Now, this information is not covered under our audit opinion. However, we do read it to make sure that it is consistent with what's presented in the audit report. And finally, we had various observations during the audit process, and I've bullet pointed them here. Nothing significant really to highlight here, except that we did report on the difficulties in completing the audit. So the audit was about probably a month and a half delayed from our original timeline to complete everything. And so these observations here are included in a more detailed report within your packet. All right, I had mentioned that I was going to show you a little bit more detail on the audit adjustments that ended up being the finding of revenue recognition and expense recognition. Oh, I went too far. Apologize. Okay, so this chart here, on the very left-hand side, we have the various fiscal periods that we reported on, both for revenues and expenses, with the original unadjusted balances. You can see in that third column, we have the identified adjustments in a very summarized form. So, for example, for the first reporting period, fiscal year 2023, the original information that was provided to us said that ULA had earned 15 million in revenues. But when we looked at the detail, we identified that there were revenues that should have been recognized in 23 but weren't recognized until 2024. And those relate to the tax accruals that should have been identified that were owed to the organization, but they just hadn't been collected yet. So they were receivables. And so these adjustments, as we identify them in the earliest reporting period, they do roll through and affect the records because the records had been closed for 2023 and 2024 by the city's accounting system. And so essentially we had to reopen those to ensure that you had proper reporting. Similar things we identified in expenses, a little bit smaller here, but in 2024 and 2025, we identified an adjustment that should have been picked up in 24, and it wasn't picked up until 25. So you can see that that adjustment for expenses, it nets out pretty close. So again, this was just timing. Now, the cause of these items, as I mentioned before, were primarily due to staffing constraints and also this being a first-year audit. A first-year audit is very difficult to go through because you're not sure what to expect. Even though LAHD staff have been very experienced in going through audits, they have a number of audits, but this was a new program. And so it was scrutinized more from the financial reporting perspective, and that's why we identified some of these adjustments here. And just to wrap up, as auditors, we like to keep the governing board and management informed of new accounting standards that are coming. So there are 3 that are coming up in the next either fiscal year 2026 or 2027. We don't expect the capital asset disclosure, that middle disclosure, will not impact ULA's financial statements because of their reporting perspective. However, GASB 103, there's been some changes in the reporting model, and how this will primarily affect ULA's statements is that MD&A section, that first section that does that comparison, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board believes that governments can improve that area. So there's additional guidance there that will be provided that will evaluate going forward. And then finally, there have been some changes that if there's any subsequent events, that certain disclosures have to be made about those. So these are events that occur after the reporting period, but are significant enough that should be communicated to the financial statement user. And with that, that concludes my remarks, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about the audit process.
Does anybody have any questions, anything they want to elevate as part of what you heard about the audit process? So clean audit, some financial adjustments in a couple of years, or in the periods audited, based on timing of recognizing revenue.
Yes, there are going to, the LAHD is evaluating their process over these program activities to ensure that these items are captured in the appropriate time period. So we do have more detail on those adjustments in our 2 findings. And one thing I didn't mention was that we did consider those findings to be material weaknesses. And what that means is that if they're not corrected it's likely that there will be a material misstatement to the financial statements. And had they not been corrected in the reporting periods that we're presenting, then we would have modified the opinion and you would have not gotten a clean opinion.
Thank you. The other thing I heard was the timing delays because of staffing. So I'm wanting to elevate that for those who approve staffing reports and who are processing staffing reports. Each person involved in this ordinance is critical. Any additional comments or questions about the audit? We'll see you again next year, I'm sure. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm handing it back to our chair. Oh,
Great. Because we haven't had public comment yet, we
Yeah.
cannot officially close 7, but once we close public comment, we'll close it. We'll close 7 as well at
Okay.
that time.
Thank you. We haven't had public comment yet. So.
Gotcha. And so it's to my understanding that we haven't went through public comment, so let's begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First speaker in person, Mr. Devin Woodfine. 2 minutes.
Can I begin? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to let you know I was able to beat my eviction last week, Tuesday. We got a motion for summary judgment based on the CARES Act, which makes my family the first person in California history to actually uphold the CARES Act and a 30-day notice requirement. My owner was very upset in court, but I'm grateful that we were able to beat him with this illegal eviction. And I wanted to say that as you guys continue to provide more and more funding, that it's important that State House LA, Measure ULA, the City of Los Angeles, and the law firms that are fighting these evictions continue to get funded, because if it wasn't for them, my family would most likely be homeless. Took up the case at the very last minute, and we were able to get this done without even having to go to trial. So it's important that we make sure that we're allowing the attorneys to be able to have jobs and support tenants like me. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
That's wonderful news. Continue.
Next speaker, Alfonso Directo Jr.
Hi, good
2
afternoon.
minutes.
My name's Alfonso Directo Jr. I'm the Advocacy Director at ACT LA. As some of you might know, ACT LA is a coalition of 50 organizations advancing housing, land use, and transit justice. We're also part of the founding membership of United to House LA Coalition. And so I'm here to speak on item 10 today and share that the UHLA Coalition is doing the work with LAHD of vetting and carefully targeting technical amendments. And while the result is a compromise, it is a set of amendment directives that comes from a deliberative and iterative process among industry experts, LAHD staff, and the UHLA Coalition. And they maintain the integrity of Measure ULA. So we're recommending to adopt these technical amendments in item number 10 today and forwarding them to the ULA ad hoc and City Council. Thank you.
That was our last in-person speaker. May I move on to the virtual comment portion?
Yes, thank you.
First speaker online, Jackson Loop. Please unmute. You may speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. My name is Jackson Loop. I'm the policy director at the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. Also would like to speak on item 10. Sorry I couldn't be there today, folks, but also just wanted to give these amendments a blessing from SCAMF. It was a long road. We worked really hard with LHD and some other important members of the coalition from our side, and really pleased with where these are at right now, and really excited to have them move forward so that we can move these awardees that are going to receive money from ULA's first official NOFA, moving forward quickly and get these projects built. Hopefully get some things going this fall by the time those amendments are through council. So thank you all so much for the work you're doing, and thank you to LHD for their collaboration on those. And yeah, hope they pass today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker online, Becky Dennison. Please unmute. You may begin speaking.
Hi, everyone. Becky Dennison from Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. Just gonna second and third the comments of my colleagues, but just want to express support for the technical amendments in item 10B. I work on housing justice policy at Legal Aid, and I was an affordable housing developer. And I really think that the thoughtful process and the working group that both LAHD and the coalition put together came up with an outcome that really balances the needs of lenders, of the sort of industry, the city, affordable housing developers, and future tenants who sometimes aren't seen in those circles. And so I think it shows that all of those interests can be balanced, and ULA was written in such a way that it was intended to be revised to have these kind of technical amendments that make the program work better and still advance the goals of ULA. So again, just urge support and appreciate LHD for setting up that process, and hope that these will move to the ULA ad hoc committee, which is obviously moving quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Joe Donlin. Joe Donlin, please unmute.
Good afternoon, Joe Donlin, Director of the United to House LA Coalition. As colleagues have already shared, we support the technical amendments before you today that will support ULA financed affordable housing projects. With your approval today, they will move forward as amendments that the COC and City Council can make directly to ULA per the measure without needing to go to the ballot. These changes are the kinds of appropriate, narrow amendments contemplated when we drafted the measure. Coalition worked closely with the LA Housing Department and the COC's Ad Hoc Policy Committee to strike the right balance around these modifications that will uphold the original intent of the drafters and the voters of Los Angeles. This shows that the processes outlined in Measure ULA to make modifications to the measure are working. Updates needed were identified, intentional deliberations were held, and thorough evaluation by multiple stakeholders and experts was integrated. This process stands in direct contrast to other efforts made to quickly rush major changes to ULA without meaningful deliberation or thorough analysis of data without artificial time constraints. Secondly, I would like to draw your attention to the new study on ULA conducted by BAE Urban Economics. I believe you all have received that report in advance of this meeting. This study is the one and only study to look at how the ULA tax actually affects the feasibility of housing construction. No one's done a study like this that looks at the true cost facing developers. The BAE report makes clear that ULA is not the big bad wolf millionaires and billionaires claim it to be. The study throws past research on ULA into question. And the big takeaway is that the economic experts say that ULA's impact on new market rate housing construction is minimal. The study was done by a well-respected firm that ran the type of financial analysis that all developers do before they decide to build. BAE found that there's only a tiny universe that would benefit from any lower tax rate. And it's interesting that that tiny universe of housing would be housing with high rents and sold by flippers. That is not the housing that will make LA more affordable. The kind of housing ULA funds, on the other hand, will make LA more affordable. Lastly, the coalition would like to reiterate our past recommendations to you concerning the COC's budget. We would ask that the COC agendize the discussion and do the necessary work to identify the full cost of your work and the support services you need, including communications and legal counsel, so that your budget going forward matches your need. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard. That was our last speaker.
Thank you so much for those heartfelt comments. We appreciate everyone that has come out, also those that are online. I also wanted to say I appreciate all of the hard work that was done by the Los Angeles Housing Department and our ad hoc committee regarding these amendments. That concludes item number 3, which is public comment. And Do we want to go back to 7 or start on item number 4?
You can close 7 unless there's any other additional comments to it.
That concludes item number 3 and item number 7. Thank you. So we can take and move on now to item number 4, which is the COC Affairs Report. Well, first of all, I'd like to say, well, put my glasses on. I'm happy to announce that we have a new member of this commission that is going to occupy seat number 15. We have Natalie Ascora. Okay. Did I pronounce that correctly? Ascora, okay. As a reminder, this seat was previously held by Daniela Solano. According to the ordinance, she's a non-voting youth member, advisory member. Natalie Ascora is a first-generation Latina student at Pitzer College studying political studies and sociology. She's involved in student leadership and community advocacy, as we can see, thank you. Working to uplift immigrant communities and to expand educational opportunities. Welcome, Natalie, please. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and say a couple of words, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, as you introduced me, I'm a sophomore right now at Pitzer College, which is one of the Claremont colleges. I was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, so I'm really excited to learn more about housing as it's been a big issue for me growing up. So yeah, I'm super excited.
Let's everybody welcome Natalie. And thank you so much. I'd also like to remind COC members that and the public that we still have a recruiting for seat number 7. It's also a transit-oriented development seat previously held by Jacob Lipa. So please visit our website, ulacoc.org, for more details and to apply, please. We would like to have all of our seats filled. And next, I'd like to update the group on the recent meeting on February 23rd. Myself, the chair and the vice chair, and the IIG met with staff from Council District number 4, Councilwoman Rahman's office, to discuss the previously introduced motion, the famous motion of ULA. Also a reminder, we submitted a motion after the January meeting regarding the COC's involvement in the amendment process. For the reference, the motion letter is in everyone's packet. The conversation was positive and productive, and it highlighted CD4's commitment to involving the COC in the amendment process. We highlighted our desire for continued collaboration and with the council district. And we look forward to future collaboration with the Councilwoman Rahman's office and also any other office that would love to collaborate with us. And also the newly formed City Council ULA Ad Hoc COC Committee. That is beautiful. Next, I'd like to update on the committees. The committee and the public on upcoming the budget process for the fiscal year 26-27, which is next month. The COC will begin budgeting for the upcoming fiscal year. It is the utmost important that all of us have a fully fleshed out budget that meets the needs of our committee so we can implement the work in all of the meaningful ways that ULA was intended. During the upcoming April and May meeting, LAHD will present its expenditure plan. Thank you, Kelly. And all of the revenue to be allocated to the COC. The Governance Ad Hoc Committee will work in partnership with the IIG and the COC to collaborate the amount across specific activities, including our upcoming program evaluation, our town hall, and our member stipends, which we really appreciate. We look forward to the beginning of this budgeting process very, very soon. Finally, I'd like to introduce the topic of discussion for the group. During our previous meetings, we have discussed Tahoe, the tenant anti-harassment ordinance, which we have heard public comment regarding individual cases. We want to emphasize our gratitude for the public continuing to reach out and to inform us and highlight their cases. We look forward to continued collaboration on this matter. While the COC does not have direct authority to oversee the implementation of the Tahoe ordinance, Measure ULA funds do support the aspects of Tahoe, and thus we are beginning to engage in the process with the commissioners for the LAHD to better understand the landscape of Tahoe, how we can work together and improve the ULA funded programs as needed. In our folders, you will find a list of topics, areas, and specific questions regarding the Tahoe. Again, these questions were developed through a collaborative approach between the COC's chair, vice chair, individual members, IIG, and the Los Angeles Housing Department. We are informed by conversations which arose from the public, and we appreciate those. Today, we are looking forward for a high-level feedback from the COC members, a robust conversation, if you will, in the areas of the inquiry, and welcome back any feedback on any of these questions. Also, any additional questions that may come to mind. Our goal is to begin this discussion today when we engage the program evaluation and ad hoc committee to further refine these questions. We will invite LAHD and the new Tahoe staff to present a report back addressing specific questions during this April or May 2026 COC meetings. And now I would like to open the floor for a robust discussion on this matter. Anyone wants to start?
Yeah, I'd like to start.
Thank you, Nancy. You have the floor.
So just green.
Green.
There we go. Hi. So just glancing at this, seems like a really valuable way to go about talking about the program and getting both a better understanding of it, and certainly responding to many of the concerns we've heard. I'm curious as to the dynamics that gave rise to this, about this program, and whether you see this as a process for discussing other programs in ULA, and how that relates to the evaluation committee's work.
Sure.
You were the dynamic.
Oh, I was the dynamic. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, basically, throughout our work, throughout the questions that we were getting, throughout the situations that we've been hearing through public comment over the last year, year and a half, we wanted to get some in-depth look on the process of how the housing department works. There were a lot of questions. There were a lot of inconsistencies with some of the things that were on the website versus what people were trying, and cases being closed, and they had no communication or understanding unless they would call in. So we thought sitting down, having a bunch of questions to present to the housing department, and maybe able to give the public some insight on how they work, who's involved. So at least the tenants won't be spinning their wheels when they file a complaint. We want to make sure that if evidence is required, what type of evidence is needed. It's not to make the job harder, it's to actually, so the tenants can come and present what they have to make the job easier. We exactly know how overwhelming it is for the housing department. I'm sure they get hundreds of complaints every single day, but if you have the complaints with the proper documentation and the proper form, then maybe it'll speed up the process and make it a little bit painless on both sides.
Oh, please.
I'm going to add a little bit. I think that what this is sort of the start of, for the entire tenure, I think this is true of the COC. There's been a question of scope. What is our scope and our responsibility? And is it limited to just making sure that the funding is is it the audits? You know, it's obviously not just the audits that's in the ordinance. It is also the program evaluation. And I think that there has been frustration from the members about, I think there's been frustration about the things that we
Continue.
well, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. There's a lot of frustration about what we know and because we do it in our jobs, and then what we at this table can actually contribute based on what we know and the expertise that we have. In some cases, it feels like we need to have trust in an agency that we do generally have trust in, but also we feel, I think, somewhat limited in what we can ask and demand and the communications that we can be a part of without violating some ethics. I'm looking at you, Mr. City Attorney, to let me know if I'm violating any ethics. And so I think part of this is that I think part of it is that we're all frustrated with what we can get involved in and what we see sort of not working. And we want to provide a place to elevate those concerns.
And to provide some citizens oversight.
Yeah.
Any other questions or responses regarding the questions? I didn't actually see the questions in the back.
I might have a quick, and you actually haven't talked really close to this thing, I guess. Given that like the scope is still,
We're
I'm also
working it
gonna we're working it out. And I'm appreciating the questions that are laid out here. I think that like one of the things that's coming up for me, as a question is when it comes to like the piece around evidence, right? And like what evidence are we asking of the folks that are actually filing the complaints that might actually make it harder for them to file a complaint? And then by way, for different reasons, but also delay or just slow down a process by which they need support in a moment of emergency, right? That's a question that comes up for me. That I think it's important, right? I'm very specifically, I'm thinking about folks, that are like in mixed migrant households, for example, right? That might have concerns about raising some issues, right? Folks that might not have full access to past documentation, right? That might be required. And I understand that there's obviously like things that are needed and are important, but like to what extent is the burden on the folks that are filing the complaint as opposed to like the people that need to be held accountable for the housing situations and the way that they are around the city? I think it's something that comes to mind.
I guess my question would be, I have a set of the questions here, but does the public have a set of the questions? So can we just read out the questions on, what we want them to work on, so at least the public knows what we're asking? All right, let's try that. All right, first, when it comes to Tahoe cases, we would like to know how many Tahoe complaints have been filed since Tahoe was enacted. Okay, and what were the outcomes? We also would like to know how many cases that were actually filed within the calendar year of 2025, we meaning January to December, and how many of those have been referred to the city attorney's office. How many have received ACE citations, civil referrals, and or criminal referrals? Because we know sometimes the activities of owners fall along the lines of illegal activity. I was told by some of the attorneys, don't say illegal, say unlawful. But to me, it's one and the same. Also, how does the Tahoe Department define a closed case? What constitute a closure? Is it that the problem has been solved, or there was no findings, or there was a lack of evidence, something along those lines? And what's the process to close a case? A lot of times I've been finding that cases have been closed and the actual person or tenant that has made the case wasn't notified. So they're thinking something is happening or it's being worked on and it's been actually closed and there was no communication. So literally 30, 60 days along the line, they call and find out, and they find out that their case was closed and they had no idea. They thought something was happening. Also, can a complaint be appealed? And there be some type of decision or request or separate review from the actual investigator that closed the case. In other words, can there be a second opinion? Also, what are the metrics on why the cases are closed? Also, how many cases are eventually reopened with similar complaints? If someone complains that they don't have proper heating and it wasn't done or taken care of within 60 days and maybe it's closed, but they reopen it, how many times does that actually happen? How many cases are, what's the metrics on how we close cases of illegal buyouts? Also, UDs, how many people are retaliated against for filing a complaint and getting an unlawful detainer on that complaint? How many are rent increases? In other words, why are the people filing these complaints? What type of evidence is being shown? Also, and what are the outcomes of these complaints in these cases? And then also the training and standard protocol. What are the procedures of the investigation and what are the best practices? And do we know what works and what doesn't work? Has these procedures been made public? And are people aware of what the process is? Also, what topics? It says what topics I&E staff required to receive training on. So how are the actual employees being trained, and how often does the staff receive these trainings? What is considered submittable evidence? I think that's a big one. And what's the procedure to escalate and to confirm the validity of submitted evidence? And how does the IE work with other divisions of the Los Angeles Housing Department, such as code enforcement, and enforce these Tahoe issues? Also, bear with me, are the types of tendencies and types of harassment polarized? Meaning, are we categorizing them by the Tahoe ordinance out of the 16 different types of harassment that is considered quote unquote harassment within the ordinance? What is the threshold of evidence that's needed to meet for the case to be considered serious or severe harassment? A lot of times we've had cases that have been closed and they were saying suspected harassment. So we need to know, what does the tenant need to provide in order to make this easier for the housing department to follow up? Also, are they tracking the complaints with the housing providers? Are there defined protocols for repeat complaints and cases? Are there several landlords over several different properties that are doing the same thing? Are they being put on the naughty list? Okay. Are the processes of the IE what are the processes of the IE to investigate, enforce, remediate, and resolve the cases of harassment? And then the last category is Tahoe education and enforcement. can you share the status update on the contracts with Intercity Law Center, SAGE, and other Tahoe education and their enforcement? And what's the expected timeline and process for the implementation of these education that's being received or given? And also, how will LAHD work with contractors to refer these cases and or direct them to the affected tenants that actually need the services? So that's just a starter, but we just want some feedback for the public. And are there any other questions or comments from any of the commissioners here?
Not related to Tahoe.
Anything?
Sort of reframing, doubling down what I said earlier, which I think is that what you're seeing is a lot of frustration. Like I said, by people who see and know a lot of things and aren't, and even though we've been given this position, aren't really sure how to exercise it. You know, we're frustrated. Like you thankfully said, at our last meeting, we're frustrated at contracts being delayed. We're frustrated about staffing not happening. We're frustrated about a Tahoe program, our tenants that we're supposed to be here to help them not be harassed, and we feel like there's nothing we can do. We're frustrated, you know, at you know, not being part of the conversations with the coalition and LHD, you know, about the technical changes. We ultimately got there, but I'm a little frustrated about not being part of those conversations. And so, like, we want to be actively part of these conversations. So that's why I think you're right to ask the questions. So that's all.
I think we just had some frustration walk out of the door.
I think so.
Okay. So, with that, if there are no additional questions, any additional comments, I don't want this to be a Zarita show. So
I'm gonna do one more finger pointing. We're
Please.
frustrated at not having heard from the new ad hoc that's been formed at the city council regarding ULA. Please reach out. Not being more part of the city council conversations. Thank you.
Chair.
please,
Just
Nancy.
a clarification. There's no vote that's required by
No,
committee on this?
no.
Okay. And has LAHD staff agreed to respond within this time frame and provide this information?
Kelly has the floor.
Thank you all. Callie Hardy with the Los Angeles Housing Department. You know, we're very much looking forward to working with the committee to provide a report back in response to the questions that you all are raising. Really appreciate you all taking the time to put together really a comprehensive list of some of the questions that you have. As the chair mentioned, we're working with you all to kick off the program evaluation and very much see this as dovetailing with some of that work. We're currently working on scoping out some of the information that we have readily available writ large in terms of data to support the committee's evaluation efforts, and then to help identify additional things that are suited for a third-party evaluator. And I think that this fits very nicely within that conversation. I will say we have to go back and work with the team on looking at the full breadth of the questions that are being brought forward, and what we have data on to be able to respond to. We certainly will look forward to working with you all on providing a response, and then I think working with you to identify if there are gaps in things that we have data on or questions that you'd like to have answered that might benefit from an external evaluation as well. I see this as fitting in with that larger work stream.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Callie. If there's any more comments, questions that we might want to add, otherwise we can move on. But I am looking.
Just a quick question. So we can't edit any of these or like add notes onto like the questions that are already drafted?
Yes,
We can.
yes.
Well, I mean,
It's your open invitation.
I would just say, I mean, some of the wording, I mean, like how many cases closed, probably be like how many closed cases how many closed cases are, like how many not cases closed, but closed cases. That's just like a minor one, but also like I'm in the harassment portion. I don't know if it's like a statistic, but maybe like, I think I have to understand Tahoe a little bit more. I'm not too familiar with it. I understand like what it stands for, what it does, but like not like the deep details. I'm wondering if there's like statistics that shows like cases that are open in as like with English as a secondary language, if that makes sense, to show like people who are like at risk, most likely immigrant communities or like the ESL. Just like for like you're talking about like the immigrant community, not also not for documents, but I'm more on the language side where it's like harassment and not like understanding like the full like scope of the system because they are like it's harder for them to access it with English being a second language. Yeah. You can also like cross-reference that information too with like the documents and in the ESL too to see like the how many people are being held back from accessing the full like privileges or like full accommodations from Tahoe.
Awesome. I don't know if everyone knows, but for the public, you know, Tahoe is the tenant anti-harassment ordinance. You can get the information on the Los Angeles Housing Department website. It is and it lists 16 different items that if something's happening to you between your landlord or the management company or their staff, what is considered harassment. One of the things that it doesn't bring us is how long the situation needs to happen in order for it to be considered harassment, which is something that, you know, we've always struggled with. And if there's any insight on that, that would be greatly appreciated as well. And if there aren't any more comments regarding this particular topic, we can actually move on, but I'm looking so forward to future reports and information. And your time and attention on this is greatly appreciated, Callie. All right, so if there is no more questions for item number 4, we can close and move on to item number 5. On our agenda, it's our ad hoc report. And we want to make sure that we keep our conversations very, very brief. First, we'd like to look at the report back from the Communications Committee, the Outreach Committee, and the Education Ad Hoc. Sure. The Communications Outreach Education Committee has met 2 times since our last full meeting. We made a few new changes. Let's see. We've made a new page on the COC website. Again, for those listening, the website is ulacoc.org. And the ad hoc committee assignments also for the public and for the fellow commissioners can easily access the information and who's seated on those particular committees. We're also launching a Google form for the people to submit testimonials, also receiving ULA funding or ULA funded services. We could share this on you could share it on your social media pages. Also, we're asking that everybody out there, if they have something that they want to say, to please put it on the website. Please share the link across your networks. We would like to hear back from the people. It's very important. We're also making a LinkedIn page for the CFC for the seated openings. Again, we have one more position or empty seat. The permanent IG job posting will also be on there, and any other relevant information for this committee that the public would like to be informed about. Next, we would like to have a report back from the Governance Ad Hoc Committee.
I think that's me.
That would be you.
That would be me.
You have the floor.
I do have the floor. Thank you. So the Governance Ad Hoc Committee has met twice since the last COC. The committee is currently coordinating with LAHD regarding hiring the Permanent Inspector General and the budgeting process. And we will meet next week to discuss both.
Fabulous.
Voila.
That's it.
I think I am also to speak about the program evaluation committee.
Okay, please.
that true?
Please, excuse me, prior to doing that, raise a question. I believe when we last met, the approval for the permanent IG head to be an exempt position had not yet been approved. Has that been approved at this point?
This is Callie Hardy with the Housing Department. No, it has not yet been approved. We are still working with the mayor's office on the exemption request.
Is there a time frame for that?
I don't have an update on timeline, unfortunately. But we continue to elevate that as a matter of top priority.
Is there something that the commission can do regarding that with the mayor's office to try and expedite this? It seems to me that it's integral to the hiring process. Thank you.
Okay. And next will be the Program Evaluation Ad Hoc Committee report back.
Also me, the program evaluation ad hoc committee met once. Since the last COC, the committee has begun working with LAHD to draft this scope for the eventual evaluation of the ULA program. And we'll meet in the coming weeks to further discuss Tahoe questions, metrics, and to continue fleshing out the process and criteria for evaluation. I really do encourage everybody that has ideas about the evaluation process to send them in and over. It's one of the most important things that we do. So everybody's feedback is critical.
All done? Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Also, finally, business from the Policy Amendment Review Ad Hoc will be discussed a little bit more in item number 10. And if there aren't any more comments, we can actually close item number 5 and move to item number 6. I would like to take and bring forth our Inspector General's report. And you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Jones. This is Abigail with the Interim Inspector General staff. So as you all know, the IIG submitted our contract extension a few months ago. The Housing Department is continuing to work to finalize our contract. And then once this happens, the IIG will begin submitting reimbursements for your member stipends. And we will all keep you informed regarding the reimbursement process. And I will pass it back to you, Chair Jones.
Thank you so much. Are there any comments from our commissioners? And if not, we can close item number 6 and move to item number 7. Oh, skipping item number 7, it was done previously. And we can move on to the LAHD report, which is item number 8. Pink, you have the floor, Callie.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Callie Hardy, Director of Strategic Engagement and Policy with the Los Angeles Housing Department. Today, I have our sort of more regular updates on revenue and expenditures, as well as some brief updates on a couple of key items that have happened since our last meeting. I'm also joined at the table here by Hannah Levian of our Housing Development Bureau, who will share an update on the Homes for LA NOFA later in this presentation. And then we're also joined today by staff from the Community Investment for Families Department, who are here to share an update as well on the latest news on the ULA Income Support Program. So, like always, we'll begin with the revenue and expenditures report. This slide shows the total revenue to date as of the transactions that occurred, basically through the transactions that occurred in January, which are recognized as February revenues. So noting that the total revenue to date since ULA inception now exceeds $1.1 billion. So I think I reported in January that we had crossed that $1 billion mark. And so now we're, continuing on our path forward in the post $1 billion mark. January revenue, so that reflects the transactions that occurred in December 2025, represents one of our highest months historically at over $56.6 million, which was, kind of continuing on that trend that we had been reporting on several months of sort of record-breaking revenue collections. However, for February, we did see a drop. So these are the transactions that occurred in January to about $26.4 million. Typically, I think we do see slightly lower revenues in that month, but we are tracking this very closely, as we may see some uncertainty around ULA revenues in the coming months. In terms of our expenditures, we thought we'd try a little bit of a different presentation format for the committee this time around, highlighting out some of the key spotlight updates around ULA spending, rather than walking you through that detailed spreadsheet on the detailed budget to actuals figures. Hopefully this is more illustrative, but we did still provide that full budget to actuals report within your packet. It's provided at the end of the presentation slides for this item for your reference as well. So first highlighting the multifamily affordable housing program and showcasing the Alvear project. This was awarded ULA multifamily affordable housing funding via the ULA Accelerator Plus program. This project has drawn down about half of its funding so far, and we're expecting the project to complete construction by fall of next year. This is a 300-unit project located on state-owned land, and has $15 million in state funding for mobility and transportation projects integrated within this housing development project. So just wanted to showcase one of the projects that is actively receiving funds via ULA to support its construction. The next program to highlight is the Homeownership Opportunities Program. We opened up the ULA Homeownership Program last year. Since our last report to you, we have executed 7 additional first-time homebuyer loans and expended over $1 million in ULA funds to support first-time homebuyers. One metric from some of the demographic reporting that we have on the impact of this program is that 42% of the homebuyers who received loans via this program identified as households headed by Black women. So just to show some of the impact of folks that are being impacted by this program. And in total, ULA has now supported a total of 25 loans and distributed more than $3.6 million in assistance through this program. In January and February, the city also continued implementation of the programs that are part of the Stay Housed LA umbrella. This included expending a total of $1.5 million for the cost of direct legal services. This funding reimbursed legal service organizations for the cost of providing 1,184 households with eviction defense services, of which 220 households received full scope legal representation and 964 households received limited scope services. And based on our latest data on the program, we're continuing to show the trend that this program is very successful at keeping people housed. Over 93% of the cases that received full scope legal representation had favorable outcomes for the tenant. And then a couple of final spending updates for January and February. We also expended over $2 million in short-term rental assistance, as well as continued funding for the Tahoe program, including a portion of that which supports the outreach and education component of that program, as well as continued reflecting our administrative costs. And as I mentioned, the detailed budget to actuals report is included in your packet if you'd like to refer to that as well. So I wanted to share a couple of other key updates on ULA related items that have made some progress since our last meeting, even though they don't necessarily show up in that budget to actual spending report. The first of which is was I think already highlighted a little bit, which is the ULA staffing plan. This was approved by the City Council on February 17th. And at that time, the City Council approved the creation of a total of 44 new ULA funded positions. This includes the 4 positions that have been requested to create the new Office of the ULA Inspector General. These were included in the proposed ULA staffing plan prepared by the Housing Department, which, as we've presented in past meetings to this committee, represented a comprehensive assessment of the total new staff positions that we identified as necessary to sustain our ongoing implementation of ULA programs. And so in that report, we did identify the need for a total of 108 new positions throughout the department. So the 44 positions that were approved represent the first batch of position approvals. These have been approved as interim staffing positions, which means that these are positions basically that were approved by the City Council and the Mayor midway through the fiscal year cycle outside of our typical budget process. I did include an update for the committee in terms of the projected annual cost for these 44. These initial tranche of positions, once filled, would represent approximately $15.6 million in administration funds. And then all of the remaining positions of the initial 108 that were not approved at this time by City Council have been included in the department's fiscal year 26-27 budget request, which is currently under review by the mayor's budget team and is anticipated to be released later next month. And so we're definitely going to be providing additional reports to this committee as the city budget process progresses and continue conversation with you all. In terms of hiring of the 44 positions that we have had approved, we're waiting for our kind of final step, aside from the Inspector General, which was asked about, the kind of final step for us to be able to hire and fill is allocation of the positions by the Civil Service Commission. So we're working with the Personnel Department to get that final approval in place so that we can begin hiring and staffing up. And so I really just look forward to continuing to update you all in the Governance Ad Hoc Committee as we can, as we're moving through, and I have better updates on timelines for all of this. The other key update to share with the committee, of course, is the update on the Eviction Defense and Homelessness Prevention Program contracts. On March 11th, the City Council and the Mayor approved 4 new contracts for the Eviction Defense and Homelessness Prevention programs. This includes the following 4 contracts: a contract for eviction defense and prevention, which includes legal services funded by ULA for the city's Right to Counsel program. A contract for those services was awarded to the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, or LAFLA. For tenant outreach and education, a contract was awarded to Liberty Hill Foundation to manage a team of community-based organizations that provide comprehensive multilingual outreach services to stabilize tenants and help prevent displacement by connecting low-income City of LA residents to available housing resources and providing information about tenant protections and related programs. For the Tahoe Outreach and Education, a contract was awarded to SAGE to increase awareness of protections afforded under the city's tenant anti-harassment ordinance, or Tahoe, to help tenants gather the evidence that's needed and connect them to available services. And then finally, the 4th contract is for short-term emergency assistance. A contract was awarded to Southern California Housing Rights Center, or HRC, to provide short-term rental assistance to tenants that are experiencing economic hardship, to help resolve rental arrears or make prospective payments. And the intent of that program is to help households maintain their tenancy and avoid displacement. All 4 of these contracts were the result of a competitive request for proposals or RFP process. What the City Council approved, again, was approval of all 4 contracts, each with a 15-month term effective from April 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027, basically bringing that initial term up through the end of next fiscal year. The contracts that were approved by council also included an option for the City Council to extend them for up to two additional 1-year terms. So basically bringing it up to about 15 months plus 2 years. So bad at math. Or the option to bring them up to that full term, I should say. The contracts that were adopted also include additional program metrics, which are intended to closely monitor the program outcomes resulting from the ULA funding on these programs, and are really intended to align as well with the metrics that are included within the adopted ULA program guidelines. So where are we now? The contracts unit at LHD is working closely with all 4 of the selected contractors, program staff, and the Office of the City Attorney to finalize and execute all 4 contracts prior to April 1st, really with the goal of having these in place before our current contracts expire on March 31st. And so, continuing that work, literally approving as much overtime as we can for staff so that we can make sure that we can get that work done now that we have the council's approval. One last note on this. So with the City Council's approval of the contracts, they also adopted several motions requesting additional information on the programs, including additional reporting on program metrics and outcomes, as well as program evaluations and audits. So sort of dovetailing with some of the work of this body and the program evaluation component in particular. So in order to respond to this, we're going to continue our work and expand on our work to make information publicly available regarding our program metrics and outcomes. So that will include additional enhancements to our existing dashboards. We do have a dashboard currently on our website for the Eviction Defense and Prevention Program, as well as launching additional dashboards to provide additional program-related data. And then we also look forward to working closely with the COC and the Program Evaluation Ad Hoc Committee in particular to basically link up these efforts with the work that's happening in the committee. Okay, and then my last update before I hand it off to Hannah to talk about the NOFA is just on the Low Income Purchase Assistance Program, which is the homeownership program funded by ULA. So I wanted to highlight that our latest loan reservation round that opened on March 4th, as of, I think, Tuesday this week, still had some limited additional loan reservations available. And so I wanted to call that out in particular and call folks' attention to the link on this slide, which goes to the department's website if folks are interested in getting more information on how to apply. And then also just presenting some of the additional upcoming loan reservation rounds, with the next one anticipated to open on June 10th. And with that, I will, unless there are questions on what I've presented so far. Yes, one question.
Okay, you mentioned that 40% of the homeowners, the new homeowners, were Black females. 42% were Black females. So do you have the statistics of any other group in terms of females?
I would be happy to get a more detailed report and provide it back to the committee. This is one of the dashboards that we've yet to launch just because we're still standing up the program. I don't have that metric with me, but I'm happy to get a more detailed breakdown and share with the committee.
I just wonder.
Yeah, thank you.
Like if it moved across the board in terms of different numbers for different groups. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great question.
Sorry, Chair.
Hello. I noticed that also under the Office of ULA Inspector General, we have the Tenant council, is there any update on that? Or how that process is gonna work?
We'll be working with the new Inspector General team to basically bring forward a work plan on establishing up the new tenant council as we have staff available to staff that committee. Yes, that is very much a priority for us to stand up this year.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, and Nancy, you have the floor?
Sorry. Yes, Callie, can you tell me on the home ownership program, or frankly on any of the others, do you track locations of loans or other activities by zip code or council district or other locational metrics?
That'll be good.
Yes, yes. So I can I'm hearing interest for more information on data on the homeownership program. So I'm happy to bring that back. Yes. And as I mentioned, as we have just frankly right now with 20, whatever the number was of loans that I mentioned, there's not sufficient data to really launch a dashboard that is like interactive. Because we also want to, we don't want folks to be able to find like basically personally identifiable information. And so the smaller sample size, it's challenging to have sort of the interactive data, but we can certainly provide a report to this committee.
Thank you. An additional question regarding the eviction defense and home prevention program contracts. Are those contracts public?
Yes, yes, the contracts. So the contracts have basically a template format that is put forward through the city council. It was part of their adoption. We're currently finalizing final edits on the contracts. Once those are executed, they will be made publicly available as well in the city's portal.
Are the budgets available for those?
They would be, yes, if they're part of the contracts, they would be made available as well once they're
Okay.
finalized.
And can you talk about what the procedure is for us to get copies of those? When they were distributed to us in January, they did not contain budgets, and when requested, I was unable to obtain copies of those.
So those final details, the fee schedules that are part of the contracts are the pieces that are being finalized now with the execution of the contracts. So once we have those available, we'll provide those to the committee.
Okay, and other questions we might have about the contracts? How should we deal with, like in Tahoe, kind of having those contracts, having those questions addressed?
I think the Inspector General team can be a great resource to provide questions to us, and we can provide responses as appropriate if we have, yeah.
Okay, just a comment that process has not worked so far.
Okay.
Okay,
Understood.
thank you.
Can I ask one more question about
Sure.
contracts? Your contract, is it over when?
What was
There we go. Magic. The current IIG contract amendment is set to expire in September of this year.
Okay, and so we need this, we need the staffing for the Inspector General to overlap with
Yes.
their contract. And it's almost April. So yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Okay. You mentioned the program, the training.
I'm sorry, Member Rout. I don't think you have to like
Yeah.
really get close.
Okay. So the training that people go through to be prepared to apply for the home loans. Previously, my question was, if people were denied, did they have an opportunity to go through the process again? Okay, and be retrained so they'd be more equipped. That was previously. But with my question specifically is, of the people who were granted the loans to become first-time homeowners, were all of them individuals who completed the training the first time and obtained the loans? Were any of them repeat applicants?
I'm just making a note of that. I think I'll have to
You'd
go
have
back,
to look.
yes, and
Okay.
and provide a report back. At our
Okay,
next
thank
meeting.
you.
Thank you. Okay.
Anyone else?
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the
Continue.
presentation over to Hannah Levian to provide an update on the Homes for LA NOFA.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the COC. My name is Hannah Levian, and I'm with the Housing Development Bureau. I'm a housing program manager. This is a really exciting milestone for us. We have arrived at the place where we are ready, almost ready to propose the awardees of the first round of the Homes for LA NOFA to our city council. And today we're going to be reporting on some high level details for you all. And we understand there's an interest in learning a lot more, but until the report becomes public, this is what we can provide. Oh, okay, there we go. So some top line numbers here. As you can see here on the slide, of the $393 million that was made available in funding, 316 million of that was ULA funding, and that covers 5 programs: the multi-family affordable housing program, the alt models, new construction and preservation program, the acquisition and rehab of affordable housing, preserving affordability program, and operating assistance. The other program in there is the pooled sources program. That was our affordable housing managed pipeline, and that's why you see the difference between 393 and 316. So the department received a total of 174 applications across all programs, so that includes the pooled sources, amounting to a total request of close to $2 billion. The department is, in terms of timing, and we received 82 appeals as stated here. In terms of timing, the department has provided the transmittal to the mayor's office, and we are hoping that that becomes public very soon, aiming to schedule this in housing and homelessness on April 15th, and then hopefully in council on April 17th, because we're fully aware there's a tax credit deadline on May 19th.
7, the 9%.
Right. We're not going to make that one. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So of the 174 applications reviewed across all programs, 149 of those applications were ULA programs, ULA applications. As noted here, the department proposes to award 80 projects with 3 alternates, and that will be in the transmittal. After validating, underwriting, scoring, and processing appeals, in total, 77 projects, again, those are ULA, the other projects are pooled sources of the 80, represent more than 3,600 units of new and preserved affordable housing. The most oversubscribed program this time was the ULA multifamily program by the ULA Alternative Models New Construction Program. We saw a fairly high demand for alt models new construction programs compared to the alt models preservation programs. And additionally, one of the stipulations in the guidelines related to the fully amortizing loan requirements prevented a number of projects in that category from passing threshold. Therefore, we sought to meet the demand of the projects that applied in the alt models new construction program, and the department moved roughly 30.2 million to the alt models new construction program to fund those additional projects that applied. We can get more into that, I'm sure, in the questions period. As discussed earlier, related to some of the amendments, the department hopes to begin some immediate conversations with body developers and other stakeholders, including but not limited to public and private lenders, to work through the ULA guidelines in order to effectuate some changes before we enter into round 2, which tentatively, we're hoping for middle to late summer. And the department will come back to this body with a more detailed report on all project applications, including those not recommended for awards in this round. And I have some proposed information that we could report back to you on. And that includes capital stack composition across new construction and preservation programs, themes in reasons for projects failing threshold, themes in successful and unsuccessful applications, and anything else this body is interested in discussing. So that concludes my update on the ULA, on the Homes for LA NOFA. We have a presenter from CIFD here, Erin, but I'd be happy to take questions before we jump to CIFD if people have them.
Quick clarification about your comment about fully amortizing loans being a problem.
Okay.
Little-
Do you have a specific question?
What is the requirements that was not being met by projects?
Yeah, so in the guidelines, it states that for the alt models preservation program, those projects must demonstrate the full amortization of the loan. And that's
The full amortization of which loan? The city loan?
yes.
Okay.
And there were projects that couldn't meet that, several of them. And that's why most of them were not able to pass threshold. And so why we moved the money from the new construction, from the alt models preservation program to the new construction program. But that's that needs to be changed. We want more projects to be successful in that program. And maybe it doesn't need to be fully changed. We need to talk about it. But that was something that was jarring for us.
Thank you.
Can you actually just elaborate a little bit more in terms of like what exactly that means in terms of like demonstrating the full amortization of the city loan? Like what is that actually like? Can you tease that out for me a little bit more?
Yeah, so I will do my best. And Michelle is probably more of an expert on this topic, frankly, than I am. But so typically the city's loan repayment structure is in what's called a residual receipts loan. And so what that means is that the borrower, so in this case, the project applicant, their repayment to the city as the lender is a little bit less. They pay us back when they have enough money to pay us back, basically. So an amortizing loan is a little bit more stringent in terms of the repayment schedule and the repayment amounts for the life of the loan. And so essentially having a more or less stringent lender in the deal for some of these projects is a benefit to them. We're a public lender, we're different from a private lender in our requirements on that payback structure. So as we require, if we were to, because of the requirements here under amortization, we become maybe a little bit more of a stringent lender, and that made it difficult for some of the projects to demonstrate debt service coverage. Michelle or Callie.
And then after that, next on is Alma. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add, so we're talking about the Alternative Models Preservation Program, which is really intended to help projects that are experiencing financial distress. I think this is the first time we've offered a preservation program as part of our NOFA, and we've learned more through this process about the needs of the projects that are coming to us, requesting this funding. So that is, I think, one of the primary items that we want to work on improving for the next round, because we're certainly seeing need for preservation dollars. But the way that the program was structured right now, under our current guidelines and NOFA regs, just made that a challenge, which is why we are making the recommendation to, rather than hold that money to improve, for the next round, we're anticipating additional funds to be allocated, as was mentioned, through the upcoming expenditure plan. And we also saw extremely high demand for the Alternative Models New Construction Program, so wanted to be able to deploy the funds. But I just wanted to add that additional context. But Chair Coulter had something.
Next is Alma.
Thank you. Under the recommendation founding, do you know how it's going to be divided that 80 projects by city council district? How is going to do that?
Yes, thank you for the question. We will detail that in the transmittal that is going to become publicly available imminently, and we can share that with all of you as well.
Awesome. Are there any more questions?
Can I partially respond?
Yes.
But the program, if memory serves, was not set up to be council district specific. It was intended for the best programs to rise, or best developments to rise to the top. And so there should not be even council district distribution as a matter of policy.
And we did not include that in our scoring criteria. We show which projects got awarded where based on the fact that council members want to know how many projects were in their district, but agree with you.
Just to share data, right? It wasn't a criterion, but everybody wants to know.
Yes.
Right. Okay. No worries. Any more questions on this one? Continue. Oh, you got a question?
Well, and we can, you mentioned the appeals process and that it was, there were a number of appeals. Just for transparency, I've received calls from clients, other developers, other consultants regarding frustration with the appeals process. I'm gonna hold on. I'm going to celebrate the great accomplishment of getting through all of this and getting the transmittals to the mayor's office. It is, that was truly God's work. And thank you for all the efforts of LAHD. Woo-hoo! And then I'm going to say, but there's been some frustration. And so at the next meeting, I anticipate we'll have more, we can go into the depth and details of the frustration, but the appeals process in particular was difficult.
And if I may provide one comment on that point before we wrap on this item. The NOFA is a competitive process that was very competitive. All of the programs, with the exception of the operating assistance program, were oversubscribed. These are also new programs. And I think we've identified and elevated some improvements that, we're already looking at for the next round, but, continuing to take in that feedback as well, both on the substance as well as the process, right? Because we want this to become a thing that we can do twice a year. And yes, there is a lot of demand and not everyone can be awarded in this round. We're hoping folks come back in the next round and we'll have more funds available. But I just want to make that comment.
Awesome.
Can I say one thing more on that, if that's okay?
Please.
So I acknowledge that in the NOFA regs, I think we said 14 days to get back to applicants, and that did not happen. So we did not meet that milestone. And in this is, so magnitude 174 applications in prior NOFAs under the previous affordable housing managed pipeline. On average, the application number was about 25 to 30. And we didn't receive additional staff in that time that we were asked to get this done. So I really want the feedback on the appeals because that was a tough process for us. We created an internal committee because of the number of appeals, and they were all very complex. So anyway, we want that, we need that, and we need it soon. So I'm going to hand it over to Aaron unless anybody else has questions or comments.
I
No, but
do
thank you for
I
that.
have one last, if I just, so sorry, I promise the last one, but like also just uniting with like the celebration of like the accomplishment and also like just on the piece around it not working for the intended types of projects that we wanted to support with the alt program, right? Like I'm very curious around what changes need to happen, when you might be able to bring that information, when we might be able to discuss those things, right? And also how how those changes and I'm just thinking about what just happened recently, right? Like, for example, if technical changes need to be made or just what changes need to be made and how those things get communicated to the folks that submitted in the first round in order for them to feel like it's worth coming back a second time, that it's worth coming back and continuing to apply, I think is something that I would want. I know that it's not a conversation for now, but for future conversations.
But thanks for raising that, and I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you. Grab the clicker, please. Technical difficulties. There we go. Okay.
Clicker closely. Oh, there it is.
All right. Here we go. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Good to see you, Ms. Jones.
here.
Good afternoon, members of the Citizen Oversight Committee. My name is Aaron Strauss, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for the Office of Community Wealth and Empowerment out of the City of LA Community Investment for Families Department. I'm happy to be here today to share updates on the design and administration of the ULA Emergency Income Support Program. Very happy to share that as of last week, our program design was fully approved by City Council and the Mayor. And that includes delegation of this specific ULA program from the LA Housing Department to CIFD. We have a total distribution budget for this program of $13.7 million that will go directly to eligible households as one-time payments between $12,500 and $19,000, depending on the household size of the applications that we see. We expect to serve about 1,000 households based on the average household size of the interim ISP run by LAHD last year. So that'll be the number of households of low-income renter households served. Again, focusing on seniors and people with disabilities who are at risk of homelessness. We're also responsive to the committee's prioritization structure, prioritizing residents impacted by the wildfires and ongoing ice raids, those who are below 30% area median income, those who are severely rent burdened, and those living in rent-stabilized units. We're currently putting the finishing touches on the online application portal, which will be used by members of the public to apply. And we're scheduling a launch press conference with the mayor's office and many other partners. So we anticipate opening the application window either next week or the week after that. I also wanted to highlight a number of crucial internal and external partners that make this program possible. Of course, my department is collaborating very closely with our colleagues at LAHD and also at the Department of Aging on program administration, design, and outreach. We also have contracted with 8 of the city's family source centers. Those are existing strong community-based organization partners of CIFD, and they'll be available to not only conduct outreach to prospective eligible applicants, but also help walk people through the application on a one-on-one basis, because there's quite a bit of information and documents collected within the application. Additionally, there are a number of other community-based organizations, such as the Department of Aging's multi-purpose senior centers, the Rec and Park senior centers, among others, that will be engaging and training on the program so they can offer additional support to applicants. Also wanted to note that US Bank is the city's contracted vendor to issue debit cards on which funds will be distributed on a rolling basis, either directly to selected participants' homes or to a family source center that helped with their application. Also highlighting that Forward Platform is our contracted tech partner that has helped to create the online application where applicants submit their information and eligibility docs. They work to make this as accessible as possible for a population that might have linguistic, mobility, or tech divides. The application will be available in all Tier 1 languages within the city of Los Angeles. They'll also be responsible for reviewing eligibility documents, sorting applicants into the tiers of prioritization based on the criteria determined by this body, managing the workflow of applicants, and following up with them as needed to collect additional documents after the application window closes. We're then also partnering with the Legal Aid Foundation of LA, Changewell Project, funded by United Way of Greater LA, to offer benefits counseling to all participants. This was a crucial component of the interim program. First, LAFLA and Changewell will train Family Source Center staff on offering what we're calling high-touch benefits consultations for participants who have slightly less complicated benefit situations, but still would like to receive information about how this additional income might impact their existing public benefits. And for cases that are a little bit more complex, LAFLA is directly available should individuals wish to speak directly with attorneys. With that all being said, we appreciate this committee's insight and input into the program. We're really excited to launch this in a couple short weeks. I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions that you might have on any of the decision points or partners that I mentioned today.
No. Any questions? I'm excited. Any questions?
Good.
This will be the round 2, right?
That's right.
Wonderful. Antonia, did you have any questions? Oh, yes, please. You have the floor.
I'm so glad. You're very welcome. If I may add, actually, this will be administered by CAFD on an ongoing basis in parallel to launching this emergency round. We're starting to put together the procurement processes for all of the partners we'll need to launch future rounds, some revenue of which has already been realized by LA Housing Department. So in parallel to launching this, we're looking at future longer-term legal aid, community-based organization, and tech partners to ensure the successful continued administration. This is being spun up really quickly at the behest of the mayor's office with all the great partners that you see on the screen. But moving forward, we also have our eye on what this program will look like in future years.
That's awesome. I'm excited. Alma, you have the floor.
No, thank you so much for sharing this information. I think so the community needs, it's very urgent for the situation that happen in the local areas. When do you are going to make a press conference or something? Could you share that time? Is something like, that is the way that more community knows what is.
Absolutely. We'll work with the LA Housing Department to ensure that the committee is aware of the press conference timing. We're just waiting on timing from the mayor's office on that exact launch. And in the meantime, making sure the application is ready for members of the public.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Awesome. All right.
Thank you so much.
That concludes the report. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I appreciate all 3 of you. That was awesome. Anyone else? All right. Well, we can take and conclude item number 8, and we can move on to item number 9. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 9, to approve additional 2026 ad hoc committee appointments per our bylaws. The COC chair, me, shall support all members. Appoint all members of committees with approval of the full commission. Due to our current committee membership and quorum rules, each ad hoc committee may have up to 5 members serving, such as I am pleased to appoint Commissioner Fernando Arbaca, thank you. To our 2026 Policy Amendment Review Ad Hoc Committee, and Commissioner Natalie Ascora, thank you, to the 2026 Communication, Education, and Outreach Ad Hoc Committee. After this appointment, these committee members can remain under quorum with 4 and 5 members respectively, and I am so happy for your participation. All right, good deal. Can we move on? Yes, they've been appointed. Do I need to vote? Oh, wonderful. Wait, can I entertain a motion to add these 2 members?
So moved.
There we go. All right, beautiful. Moving right along. Thank you so much. So move it. Wait. It's been moved and seconded. Can we call for a vote?
Yes, Madam Chair.
I'm having too much fun today.
Chairperson Jones,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Espinosa Coulter,
Yes.
Committee Member Abarca,
Yes.
Committee Member Ascora. Oh, sorry, never mind. You don't have, my apologies. Committee Member Lewis, Committee Member Morales,
Yes.
Committee Member Nishimoto, Committee Member Reed, Committee Member Romero,
Yes.
Committee Member Rout.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful, wonderful. That will conclude item number 9. We can move on to item number 10. Most exciting, the report from the Policy Amendment Review and Ad Hoc Committee for all the proposed technical changes and amendments. To support the ULA finance housing development projects. We want to start with our LAHD presentation.
Thank you all so much, and hello again. Before I jump into this item, I just wanted to share a very timely update I just received from the mayor's office that the exemption for the Inspector General has been issued from their department. So it's now before council, and so we'll be working with City Council on getting that scheduled ASAP. So I wanted to share that really timely update.
Thank you, Mayor's Office.
Thank you for that update. That is wonderful news. All right.
Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, really happy to be here today to share with you all a report on the proposed ULA technical amendments. Still here with Hannah Levian as well of our Housing Development Bureau to help us, answer any questions that this committee might have, because this has really been a joint effort between our policy and our housing development teams. But so the report that we have for you all today is in direct response to the committee's direction and request at your last meeting in January. And before I get into it, want to start with a little bit of background on the item that's before you. So the department has identified the need for a set of really narrow technical amendments to some of the provisions within ULA that affect some of the financing terms that are applicable to projects that are receiving ULA funding. And the purpose of this is to help better facilitate the development of our ULA funded housing. The need for these amendments arose based on our understanding of some constraints from lenders working within the industry, in particular that we work with on ULA funded affordable housing, in particular because some of the provisions as written within ULA are quite specific and don't necessarily fully square with some of the underwriting standards that many of our affordable housing lenders are looking at sort of on the origination side. So what we're talking about here really are truly narrowly focused technical amendments that are intended to address the legal and financial requirements that are existing today within the ULA measure that might pose a challenge to the department's ability to timely and efficiently administer the ULA Affordable Housing Program funds. And so the goal that we have with identifying these changes is to enable the department to make maximum use of the ULA revenue source, help support timely closings, loan closings for our ULA funded projects, and basically help avoid unnecessary legal costs associated with that. So both the delay and an additional potential legal cost associated with loan closings. As was shared during public comment, the department has held a number of working group meetings with members of the ULA Coalition, SCAMP, as well as professionals in the affordable housing lending space to really work together to collaboratively develop and vet proposed technical amendments that would address those lender constraints while still drawing that needle and ensuring that we're upholding the intent of ULA. So as requested by this committee, we have presented these proposed technical amendments to the Policy Amendment Review Ad Hoc Committee and are happy to be able to provide a detailed report here today to the full committee. Because these technical amendments are targeted in nature and are, again, intended to support implementation of our existing ULA programs, we believe that these are candidates for consideration and possible adoption by the City Council under the authority that's provided within the ULA measure, right? So as provided by the ULA measure and as codified at Los Angeles Admin Code Section 22.618.8, the City Council does have the limited authority to adopt amendments to the ULA ordinance with the input of the Citizen Oversight Committee if those amendments meet certain key limitations, which are summarized and shown on this slide. to summarize the authorities provided in that section of the code, the Citizen Oversight Committee has a role in reviewing any proposed amendment to ULA before the City Council may adopt it. And the COC may express an opinion on whether the amendment furthers the purposes stated within ULA and is consistent with the expenditure categories. If the COC finds that any proposed amendment is not consistent, the City Council is required to make written findings to the contrary, supported by substantial evidence in the record, before it may proceed with adoption of the amendment. Before I walk through the details of the proposed technical amendments, I want to talk through a little bit our proposed process and a tentative timeline for these to be considered by the COC, Mayor, and City Council. And really our goal with this proposed timeline is to work through these technical amendments with a goal of having them set in place and adopted by the time that we anticipate our first ULA funded loan closings to begin from this current round of the Homes for Lay NOFA. We're currently anticipating that those first loan closings are likely to occur in early to mid fall between October and November of this year. So we're really looking to that as our goal and sort of target deadline to ideally complete this adoption process and bringing this forward to all of the decision makers. So following today's meeting, what we would propose, if the COC is supportive, would be to issue a report forward to the mayor and the council containing the department's recommendations as well as any potential findings made by the Citizen Oversight Committee. With a goal for this report to be considered prior to June. And basically at that time, the council would provide direction to the city attorney to work with the department to prepare a draft ordinance that would codify the proposed amendments. Again, with a kind of target to pursue final adoption of that by September. Okay, so this slide now shows a summary of the recommended technical amendments, and I will stress that these are very much technical in nature, again, focused on some of the specific provisions within the ULA measure that apply to affordable housing activities. I'll do my best to explain it. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. So the amendments broadly fall within two categories. The first would provide a slight change in the definition of a qualified housing organization for the purposes of determining applicable exemptions from the ULA transfer tax. And the purpose of this is to better capture the typical deal structure that we see in affordable housing development. And I'll talk through these in more detail on the subsequent slides. It's just an overview. And then the other group of changes identified, so 3 additional changes, focus on requirements that apply to that would apply to the regulatory agreements for projects that receive ULA funding via the ULA multifamily, alternative models, and acquisition and rehabilitation programs. So focused again on activities being funded by those programs. The changes identified here would include a modification to the subordination requirements to better allow projects to leverage other public funding sources, a change in the resale requirements, just in limited cases of potential foreclosure, and then providing some limited additional flexibility regarding rents in those narrow cases in which a project might lose its rental subsidy. So again, I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail. Starting with the exemption. So currently within ULA, there are several existing exemptions that set eligibility for an exemption of payment of the ULA transfer tax based on the characteristics of the transferee, meaning the entity that is purchasing property. This exemption, so that exemption allows certain purchasers to be exempt from payment of the ULA tax. The one that is at issue here is the exemption that is administered by the Housing Department, provided in Admin Code Section 21.9.14, which is an exemption for qualified affordable housing organizations. We have promulgated guidelines that govern our implementation of this exemption, and what we look for in administering this, right, is both looking at the organization's history and experience of developing or managing affordable housing, as well as a review of the entity's organizational structure, and it's that piece in particular that we're elevating with this discussion. So the entity is required to meet certain organizational characteristics that include complying with an ownership and management structure where a qualified nonprofit is serving as the managing member or general partner of the ownership entity. So really they're the key driver in terms of decision making around ongoing operation, development, management of that property. And so we're looking at this fourth bullet point here, and in particular, the language bona fide nonprofit corporation, which has been a challenge for us as currently drafted, because this language overly restricts the type of partnership structures that are able to qualify for the exemption, and in fact excludes the typical structure that is common to many of our affordable housing developments. So specifically, this is looking at providing an exemption for a limited partnership or limited liability company in which the general partner or managing member is a bona fide nonprofit corporation. And in fact, the typical structure that we see is sort of an additional layer where that managing member or general partner is an additional limited partnership or limited liability company. So to address this limitation and better reflect the intent of ULA to exempt qualified nonprofit affordable housing organizations, we do recommend consideration of the technical amendment that's shown on this slide, which would recommend an amendment to section 21.9.14 to add that a nonprofit limited liability company and or a limited partnership whose general partner or managing member is a limited liability company or limited partnership that is wholly controlled by nonprofit corporations meeting the affordable housing development qualifications. So we believe that this would help us to advance our goals of promoting the development of nonprofit affordable housing and ensuring that the current exemptions that exist within ULA are in alignment with the typical organizational structure that we see with many of our affordable housing projects. Yes, Nancy, Commissioner Lewis.
Clarification, wholly controlled, that means 100%, not 51%?
So this is this looks at within the guidelines that have been established, we look within the partnership agreement for certain responsibilities to be assigned to the nonprofit entities. That is the intent of this, is to carry that forward so that they're basically the ones who are assigned the duties of the managing member, general partner, who are involved in the day-to-day decision-making of the project. Does that make sense?
Help me out, Michelle. I'm rusty on this stuff. So 51% managing general partner versus admin general partner works?
For purposes of the welfare
purposes of this?
and for this, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mhm.
Okay. Okay, moving forward into the other three amendments that have been identified. Again, these are focused on the requirements within the regulatory agreements for projects receiving ULA funding. The first such item has to do with the subordination requirements within the ULA measure. And so the current language requires that the affordability restrictions required by ULA are senior to any lien position under any condition. And I've provided the relevant section of the admin code here for reference. I won't read it all out. But the general explanation of this, right, is that when loans close and we execute the regulatory agreements, the agreement that is recorded first is considered senior, and then the subsequent recorded agreements are considered subordinate to those agreements. The current language requires that the ULA affordability restrictions are senior under any condition, with a limited exception for the land use component of the affordability covenant, which is required by law to be senior. And having this regulatory agreement senior to any private loan ensures that the affordability requirements remain even in case of foreclosure. However, other public lenders may have requirements in their regulatory agreement that may conflict with this, basically requiring their affordability regulations to be senior, which may cause some tension when we get to the loan closing table. In particular, thinking about our state funding source, as well as I believe this provision exists within LAHSA funding source as well. So to address this, our recommendation is to allow some narrow additional flexibility for the affordability restrictions to be subordinate to the affordability restrictions of other public lenders. So really allowing us to look at the requirements of other public lenders in each deal and determine the necessary kind of order of seniority based on the other lenders. Maybe if there's apologies. Any questions on this piece? Okay. Stop me if there are. Okay. The next one has to do with the resale provision. So within ULA today, the current language limits the resale of any ULA-funded rental property in order to maintain long-term stewardship of our publicly funded affordable housing by mission-driven nonprofit organizations and housing cooperatives, right? So this language limits any resale to the listed types of entities within this provision of the admin code. However, we understand that this restriction poses some challenges on the front end, particularly for other lenders who are looking at their ability to resell their property truly. And, you know, when we get to those worst case scenarios, if we're looking at a potential foreclosure, which is a scenario that, you know, typically we're working right to avoid and looking at other problem solving efforts in advance. However, that poses a challenge on the front end for lenders who want to look at their risk within the deal before they lend to the project. So that could cause potential delays if they don't see, you know, if we're having some, you know, back and forth on how we mitigate those concerns with lenders, and also could increase the cost of them lending to the project, right, as they're seeing potential higher risk. And so to remedy this particular tension, the recommendation here is to clarify that the resale provisions would not apply to a transfer by foreclosure, deed in lieu of foreclosure, or similar type of conveyance. And as I mentioned, these are really our last resort situations. We have a commitment as a department to monitor our projects, make sure we're taking early interventions to avoid this scenario wherever possible. But the purpose of this technical amendment, as I mentioned, is really to address those lender concerns on the front end. And then the last piece here has to do with some of the provisions within the ULA measure that speak to the rents within the individual units within the projects. And in particular, you know, read together, restrict the ability for income restricted units to float up in the rare instance where there's a loss of rental subsidy. For example, the one I like to point to is bullet point number 3 here, which states that no housing unit may be leased except to the household at the level of affordability and no more than an affordable rent for which the unit was originally dedicated. Typical process for funding sources that may utilize rental assistance. So we're, for example, talking about project-based vouchers for projects, is that there is the ability to increase rents in those rare instances where that rental assistance contract might terminate for reasons not attributable to the property owner. So this is somewhat standard language in a lot of our regulatory agreements today, and is also template language that is required by many lenders that we work with. However, we read these provisions within the ULA measure as limiting our ability to incorporate those. So to address that, we recommend yet another technical amendment that would provide the needed flexibility for public lenders to permit an adjustment of rents if there's a loss of that rental subsidy, again, due to reasons not attributable to the developer. And that would be consistent with similar rent float-up procedures and policies that is in our existing, basically our existing template lender regulatory agreements. So just providing us the ability to use that existing practice for projects that might be receiving ULA funding.
So one of the questions that came up during conversation, this says loss of rental subsidy. In those instances, there could be a float-up provision. Right now, HUD is underfunding the housing authorities so severely that the vouchers don't have the same voucher payment standards. And so at some point, we as an organization might need to revisit some of the language. So not just the loss of rental subsidy, but also, such a reduction from the voucher payment standards that it might jeopardize the project, with the caveat of appropriate tenant protections being in place.
Any other comments?
Maybe just a clarifying question on this is just because I heard the on the subordination amendment language, right? Like it's being adjusted in order to, like, be flexible to other other public resourcing that requires it to be senior. Just because of my ignorance here, is there any project that would take on private capital as part of the resourcing? And is there any language on the ULA money being senior to private capital? Is there any scenario where there's private investment coming in where they need to be senior? And is that an issue?
That's a great question. So I want to clarify for the subordination, it has to do with the affordability restrictions, not to the debt. So I think typically a public lenders are a junior lender to private, meaning in terms of the order of repayment. However, this is looking specific, so that kind of order of operations is bifurcated from the seniority of the affordability. And the intent there, right, is to ensure that you're maintaining that affordability on the project. Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Beautiful. All right.
That's my presentation. So thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And explaining those changes. I hope that was helpful. Everyone, any questions? All right.
And a friendly reminder, just speak very closely to the microphones.
Oh, hello. All right, good deal. Yes, Nancy.
Is there a vote required by us in support of these amendments?
I believe there is. But oh, okay.
We go here. Okay. So I think that is me then. It is me. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you, Callie and Chair. Thank you. Since the last TOC meeting in January, the Policy Amendment Review Committee has been working with LAHSA and the Coalition to discuss proposed technical amendments to Measure ULA. You already did that. My apologies. I am skipping in my notes. Bear with me. Thank you, Callie. I will now present the Policy Amendment Review Ad Hoc Committee's findings. I'm going to read this into the record. Item 10B, The action is the ad hoc committee recommendation on proposed ULA technical amendments to support ULA financed housing development projects. The date being March 26, 2026. The motion is as such. The ULA Citizens Oversight Committee, ULA COC, supports the proposed technical changes shared in the Los Angeles Housing Department's, LAHD's, presentation during the March 26, 2026 ULA COC meeting in accordance with section 22.618.8B of LA Administrative Code. The ULA COC shall review any proposed amendments to ULA before City Council adopts the proposed amendments and may express an opinion on whether the amendment furthers the proposed purposes stated in 22.618.1 of this article and is consistent with the expenditure categories in section 22.618.3 of this article. The Policy Amendment Review Ad Hoc Committee of the ULA COC has been collaborating on these proposed technical changes with LHD and the UHLA Coalition through a series of meetings and reviews to determine if the proposed technical changes outlined through the months-long collaborative process is consistent with sections 22.618.1 and 22.618.3 of the measure. Through recommendation of the ad hoc committee, the COC understands that the proposed technical changes to the measure will assist LAHD in facilitating development of affordable housing projects awarded by the recent Homes for LA Nova, which is in line with the measure's goals of producing and preserving affordable housing and creating permanent funding streams in Los Angeles to serve key populations such as low-income renters, seniors, and persons with disabilities, as outlined by section 22.618.1. Through reporting from LAHD and consistent with recommendation from the ad hoc committee, the COC finds that the proposed technical changes would not alter the expenditure categories outlined in section 22.618.3 of the measure. As such, the COC is pleased to move the technical recommendations presented during item 10 of the March 26th, 2026 COC meetings through the following motion. I move to find that the Citizens Oversight Committee, ULA COC, of Measure ULA finds that the proposed technical changes further the purposes stated in section 22.618.1 of the measure, and that they are consistent with the expenditure categories outlined in section 22.618.3 of the measure. I further move to direct the Los Angeles Housing Department to transmit the proposed technical amendments to Measure ULA to the Los Angeles City Council for further action.
Wonderful. I second.
Somebody else.
Oh,
Second.
there you go. Thank you. All right.
Would you like a roll call, Madam?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That has been moved and seconded. I will now roll call vote. Chairperson Jones,
Yes.
Vice Chair Espinosa Coulter.
Yes.
Committee Member Barca,
Yes.
Committee Member Lewis, Committee Member Morales, Committee Member Nishimoto, Committee Member Reed, Committee Member Romero, Committee Member Rout.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And thank you for that. I appreciate you reading that motion. All right, so moved, so passed. That means we can close item number 10. And we can move on to item number 11, and that is a request for any future agenda items. So now I will update and the group on any future agenda items. As a reminder, we will invite Tahoe staff to report back during the April and May meeting. Do any members have any additional items or requests for the upcoming agendas that you would like to state right now?
Looking forward to hearing about Homes for LA.
Homes for LA. Yes, Antonio.
Periods and changes, and adapting specifics to our meeting. And what came out of it was, if there were changes, would we consider a timeline, like a reference point of when would any changes and any additional information were going to the region, put a timeline on it. Project a point where that might be discussion. Excuse me? A discussion for any changes that whenever we have said, oh, well, is that in place? Can we consider it? Can we consider adjusting it? How to project it? Throughout the meeting, it kept coming up, it kept coming up. So in discussing changes, can we get recommendations or project time for completion or adjustment or review?
Yes, please.
Ask a clarification question. Is this with regards to the guidelines and regulations? Like
It's in regards to each time we discuss something, an item, whether it was, for example, I said, do you know if any of the people who were approved, who got approved for loans, if those individuals had reapplied for first-time homeowner loans? And that wasn't clear. It was something that was going to be researched. The question about what percentage of other women became first home buyers. That question also.
To my understanding, I believe that that was heard and initiated, and Kelly said that she's going to research it. So we should look forward to that information coming to us.
So I'm saying, my question is, forward to the next meeting or some eventuality?
Well, that's a good question. I know the report back for the questions and other things are for the April and May. Do we know a timeline, whether it would be the very next meeting or the meeting in May?
Or just when we are talking about it and asking about it, and there's a response that I'll research that. Could there be a reference of when we might get that information in any particular category?
Right. So in other words, when something like that is brought up, is it going to happen at the very next meeting? And that's the limit, the next meeting, the next 30 days? Would that be?
Or could it be offered that I'll have it to you by the next meeting, or
a confirmation? Can you
of
help
some
us out?
Yeah, so I can step in here on potential next steps. I think in meeting is difficult to project a timeline on requests. What we can do is the IIG team can note all of the follow-up asks that have happened as part of the meeting notes. And then we can coordinate with LAHG on what the best way to route it is. Because in some cases, it might be an email follow-up directly to a member. In other cases, it might be routed through an ad hoc committee that then reports back to you all as a full group. In other cases, it might be a more substantive report that comes back in following months. So it's hard to say in the moment, but what we can do on the IIG front is follow up with you all, particularly with the chair and the vice chair, since we meet with you all at a more regular cadence, to say, here's what we heard on next steps, here's what we heard back from LHG on the response time, and then we can follow up directly with members who asked the question.
Great.
Oh, yeah, I was just waiting till you finish. Nancy, you have the floor.
Yeah, just to expand on that, I think what I'm hearing from you is a need to sort of organize our follow-up. I think what's happened, sometimes maybe you get back to an individual, but the rest of us may not hear it. We don't have minutes of these meetings, and so it's hard to track that. And frankly, I'm wondering if, given new AI options, whether there's a possibility of using AI to create, maybe people who are more aware of this, no, that's a really bad idea. But to create some kind of a meeting record and, don't have to be official minutes, or if there's another mechanism. And so perhaps an agenda item for the future is how to create a communications process that allows for that kind of follow-up and tracking of really information flow.
That's actually a good idea.
So-
Is it possible for us to, when we have those follow-up questions, to incorporate those, if we have the answer at the very next meeting, into the chair's report? And if not, also state in the chair's report that we're still working on it. And then that way, everybody that has the information or the question, and we're all given this answer at the same time.
Okay, excellent.
Would that work?
Yes, excellent example. When he mentioned making information available for individuals who may not understand the criterias that are described in English, and perhaps there's a need to make that adjustment. So that's something that could be targeted or projected as when it would occur, so that we're not moving along the same path and people are still sort of left out of the process because they didn't quite get what it meant in English.
I notated that under language justice. So in your question in particular regarding the language, would that be something that we could put on our website in a different language? Or does it necessarily have to be a report back? Or all of our follow-ups actually, should they be, I guess, uniquely formed to the type of question and the type of information that's needed and from the person that it's needed from, right?
Okay, so would that be an action item, part of a plan to increase the availability of information? If I don't know how to apply, if I don't know what it means, how can I successfully apply? If I'm limited due to interpretation. So if we say that there's a need, we've stated there's a need. So the thought is, what are we going to do? How is it going to be implemented? And will it be implemented before the next round?
I was gonna say, so I feel like my question kind of like, I guess you could say like two follow-ups to it, where it's one, like a data breakdown, right? Like asking for data on like applicants having like English as a single language, but two, like the justice language, language justice portion, where it's like, how can we ensure that people who are English as second language speakers are getting accommodated in the application process, or are able to like fully understand the criteria. Yeah, like just to have the same access, equitable access to whatever resources they need as English speakers, despite being English second language speakers.
Can we actually put that on the agenda for next time to hash this out in a discussion? Can we do that? I think there's enough of us here. I'm familiar with the language justice and trying to make sure that several languages are offered in application process, but for something like education and outreach, we need to figure that out. And suggestions, can everybody come back with suggestions next time?
Yeah.
That'd be
Clarifying question?
Yeah.
Is the question
was a
about how
two-part.
this group does language justice issues, or is it about how the housing department? Because and the reason I ask that is because to the extent it's about this group, I think that really goes very well to one of the ad hoc committees that does the like education and outreach component. So I don't know. I think it should probably start there.
I also heard some of this, I think, was originating from the question that you had asked, which was specifically related to the Tahoe report back. So I think that was part of a conversation exactly to gather those additional questions, which we are expecting to get responses to from Cali and LAHD when they do the LAHD report back on Tahoe. And then I think there's like this third group of things that are just like the questions we ask throughout the meeting. And I think all of those have different like answers and responses. So it may make sense for us to like separately break that down. And part of that too, I think, is for us as like the committee too, is that maybe when we are asking, especially those ad hoc questions, that we are also like making sure that we are in that moment pinning down more of like, okay, we want to make sure we're marking that question or those sorts of things. So I think that maybe that we just need to identify that we're talking about three separate things. Right. That'll have like, so that's like 3 agenda items or like 1 agenda item, but I think we need clarification.
And then I also think it depends on the type of data that's needed or report back, right? Because yours seems a little bit more technical when it comes down to the information for Tahoe, but then in general, language justice, right? Is clarification?
So I think
I'm
like,
trying to break it down.
I mean, I think there is like a specific portion that asks for Tahoe, but I think in general, we should always think about language justice. Yeah. And like the data portion, I don't know if it's like a question being asked, like, hey, like, what is your primary language? And if not, that'd probably be like something to bring up. Like, we probably should be asking, is English your primary language? Is it? And if it's not, then how can we better meet your needs? That actually would be another good question to follow up to. Yeah.
Okay, so
There we go.
can I offer a suggestion to maybe just move us along here? So I think in terms of the question on internal process for how the COC keeps abreast of all of the requests and the follow-ups, that feels like something that the governance ad hoc should tackle and come up with a formal recommendation to you all as a full body, and then say, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to operate moving forward, right?
And is that something that we would give them to address? Would that recommendation come from us to?
Like, that's something we can do. We can take that as our notes right now.
Okay.
As the IIG can go ahead and initiate that process immediately. And make that recommendation from the governance ad hoc, assuming we're meeting between that now and the next meeting. Make that an agenda item to report back on what the process is or what the proposed process is. I think on the Tahoe front and the list of questions and modifications and follow-ups there, that feels like something that goes to the program evaluation ad hoc committee for LAHD to report back on these specific questions, including the changes. So what I would ask of members now to note on your individual to-dos, because you can't converse outside of a meeting, is to send individual requests for amendments directly to the IIG, and then we will funnel that through the evaluation ad hoc committee, who will then send it to LAHD they'll report back, and then we'll report back out to the full committee in the next, we'll report back to the full committee. We'll give you an update on timing for that front. And then the third piece about language justice more generally, that also feels like a government ad hoc thing in terms of internal policies and procedures and how this body operates. So we can also pick that up in the next ad hoc meeting and then report back to the full group. Sorry, this is kind of convoluted, but we got to do everything on the up and up for Brown Act. Yeah.
Can I also add, I mean, I think maybe I'm just not hearing you right, but I know you said the language justice should go to governance, but can I also recommend that it goes to like program evaluations, just so like to ensure that like as we're evaluating programs, we're evaluating them on justice, like on the like a framework that includes language justice, if that makes sense?
Yeah, go ahead, Callie.
I was just gonna add from LHD's standpoint, I think we're happy to talk about our language access plan. And then maybe work with the program evaluation ad hoc to look at I heard you ask about data and what questions are we asking on program intake? And so happy to look into I don't know the answer to that right now for all of our programs, what data we're collecting. But take that up with the program evaluation ad hoc and move forward from there. Does that work? And I wanted to add one additional comment just for the committee's awareness. I also take notes on all the questions that are being asked throughout the committee. And some of the questions that were asked for more information, unfortunately, I don't always have the answers right on the tips of my fingertips. But I make a note and plan, typically try to include that in our report, our regular report at the subsequent meeting.
Awesome. Beautiful. Up.
One more thing. If hypothetically I wanted to like be considered to go on the program evaluation ad hoc, would that be like a next agenda meeting or next meeting agenda item? Could I propose that?
And do we have space? All right, there it is. It's on the agenda.
Perfect.
That was easy. Beautiful. All right. Oh, please don't
That'll be
apologize.
so fast. I do think it would be a good idea at the next meeting for there to be, maybe as part of the chair report back or something else, a report back about the city council's ad hoc ULA committee meeting. They're meeting tomorrow. They may be meeting more. And I think hopefully people can join so that we're like aware just from being able to listen ourselves. But to the extent people can't, I do think it's important that this body is continually being updated about that too.
Got it.
Can you distribute a link for,
Yeah, it's on the
Uh,
city council's committee website. but
I
can-
understand that's a little bit more challenging,
Yeah,
more time consuming to
I send it
access.
to IIG.
If the IIG can distribute that link, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and Abigail will be attending.
Thank you.
or listening in at that meeting, so we can report back.
All right, beautiful. We good? Oh, everybody, that was a thumbs up. Okay, wonderful. So that will conclude item number 11 for future agenda items. And that will bring us to item number 12, which is adjournment. So moved.
Second.
Second. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. All right, safe ride home.